Tim Draper, the investor. Entrepreneurship is the lifeblood of industry, but dreams need to be financed. Anthony Scaramucci's SALT conference lured me to Vegas, and while the city is known for its whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas line, it could also be known by the unofficial credo, ask for forgiveness, not permission, which is the ultimate mantra of all entrepreneurs. When it comes to investing and backing entrepreneurs, investors need to have the confidence themselves to roll the dice on big dreams and big dreamers, and very few venture capitalists dream as big as Tim Draper. A trained engineer with an MBA from Harvard, Draper is the founder and managing director of Draper Fisher Jurvetson, whose early financial support to Hotmail and Skype made it a legend. He was also a major backer of a ballot initiative to subdivide California into 3 smaller states. Clearly, Tim isn't afraid to dream big or small. With money and regulation on the line, how does he discern whose entrepreneurial drive is worthy of backing? What are the traits he looks for before deciding to commit his dollars to a vision? Let's talk a little bit about your upbringing in the context that your grandfather was a venture capitalist. Mm-hmm. Your father was as well.
Right.
So, was there any pressure? Is this something that you were like, I definitely want to do this? Or were you one of those rebellious kids that's like, no, I'm going to be like a rock star or a doctor or something else?
Well, it's actually neither of those. I wanted to be a baseball player when I was 10, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur coming out of business school. And then I started to realize that I had too many different ideas for entrepreneurship. And so I realized I had 4 really interesting ideas coming out of business school, and they may have done actually pretty well. But I realized that I was more made up to do a variety of things, a little bit more like a bee than with a snake or a shark or whatever. A little bit more of a bee, spreading the goodwill around. So,
not to kind of butter you up, but in terms of VCs, it's like if there was the Hall of Fame of VCs between Hotmail and Skype. This is early. Nowadays everybody, you can't swing a cat around. Everybody's a VC or at least an entrepreneur. What was it about specifically? Was there a pattern? Was there something in Hotmail and Skype that you saw that you said right away? Or was it the other way where you actually had to be convinced or some didn't get it? Just want to get a top level understanding of that.
That's interesting because I call that the train leaving the station. When you get a sense that a train is leaving the station, it's a good idea to go get on it. And that was the case definitely with Skype. With Hotmail, Hotmail was really interesting because their original idea that they came to us with, we walked them out the door and said, we're not interested, and they turned around and said, we have this other idea. And it was weird enough that we thought, that's interesting. We could, that really could be something interesting. And giving away free web-based email, it was kind of like, God, free communications? It was unheard of. We always thought the post office was cheap, but that was free. And that was a big breakthrough. And boy, has that made a huge impact on the world.
So I said, how about if you just put a note at the bottom of each email that says, P.S. I love you, get your free email at Hotmail. They looked at me and they thought, of all the venture capitalists in the world, why did we get this one? But I kept pushing, I was persistent, and they finally agreed. But they said, but no P.S. I love you. Just get your free email at Hotmail. And to this day, I think we would have had a much more peaceful and loving world if they had kept it.
So when you look at the web, there's always the 3 C's, content, community, and commerce. Is that basically the MO? The community is the one that spreads the fastest, but is like the hardest to monetize, if you think about it?
Well, what's great about the world now is that it all spreads fast. Because we're all interconnected now. We all, if something interesting happens here, it'll immediately get spread around the world. And if we invent a new kind of cup or a new way of delivering water to our mouths or whatever, we will have the opportunity to spread it to the world if it's interesting enough. That is really valuable. And the media used to be 3 central channels. Now they seem to be more the thought police, and the rest of us are really the media. And that world has changed in a big way, and we're all kind of wide open. So if you're an entrepreneur and you have some really interesting breakthrough, it will spread around the world, no matter if it's hardware, a medical device, or a new source of Bitcoin money or something. You know, there are lots of things that are spreading around the world very quickly right now.
So 40, 50 years ago, mom and dad wanted their kid to be a doctor or a lawyer. And then 30, 40 years, or no, sorry, 20, 30 years ago, it was like, I'm going to be an investment banker, a venture capitalist, a hedge fund. Nowadays, it's a lot, I want to be an entrepreneur. Do you see that? And what do you think was the biggest reason for that change?
I think it's very healthy, because then those people who go off and become entrepreneurs, if they win, it's fantastic. If they lose, they still learned how the system works. They understand how money is made and created, and how our economic system works, and what a supplier is, and how to deal with employees, and all those things. So I highly recommend to young people to go ahead and be an entrepreneur, and I think that is a healthy thing to do. And it's kind of fun for me to hear from you, because my mission in life has been to spread entrepreneurship and venture capital around the world, because yes, my grandfather was a venture capitalist, my father was a venture capitalist, and we saw what that entrepreneurial spirit did for the Silicon Valley. It turned a sleepy kind of rural town into a booming metropolis of ideas and creation and better health and better, just an extraordinary growth engine.
What's the biggest mistake you've seen entrepreneurs make?
The biggest, lots of them. You can make a lot of mistakes as an entrepreneur. I guess the biggest mistakes I've made as an entrepreneurial venture capitalist are failures to act, not the actions themselves. I've made some mistakes in actions, and what those really do are make you a little embarrassed, or you lose face or whatever, but it doesn't really move anybody's needle. But the failures to act, where I didn't put the money down when I had a chance to fund Google, and I didn't put them, and I got outbid.
Why didn't you invest in Google ultimately?
Well, I brought it into the partnership, and they shot it down because we already had 6 search engines in the portfolio. So there you go. And it might have gone a different way if we had funded it. We never would have allowed Google, if I had funded Google, I never would have allowed them to steal the GoTo technology, because we were investors in GoTo. Yeah. But they did, and they lost the lawsuit but won the war.
Yeah, Google is a perfect storm. You know, it was a 13 search engine. The Alta Vistas were becoming portals. It was post-bubble bursting. You know, it was a perfect storm.
Yeah.
You know. Luck and
but failures to act. I would say that's the biggest problem, and a lot of entrepreneurs don't take that first step, and that's a big part of. You know, we have Draper University, and I give a big lecture at the very beginning of the school each session. And I say, okay, and as an entrepreneur, what's the first thing you need to do? And then they say, strategize, write a business plan, meet a venture capitalist, borrow money, whatever. I say, no, it's to take the first step, and I take a step, and we all go into the pool. And you take a step because you're taking a step into the unknown. You realize that it's a great unknown out there. You don't know once you take that step. You might have to take a quick step back and take 2 steps to the right before you take another step. So it's just do it. Do it. As an entrepreneur, the best entrepreneurs are doers.
So historically, education has served as like the equalizer of society, and you could also argue home ownership and the stock market. Today, realistically, you know, education just makes you go in debt, and stock market's not accessible.
Except Draper University.
Except Draper, yeah.
None of the Draper University people have gone into debt because of us.
What's the vision and mission of the school?
It's to transform people into heroes. We have, the mission is, because you've got to be a hero if you really want to become you can be a decent entrepreneur without becoming a hero, but to be a really extraordinary entrepreneur, you have to be a hero. You have to be willing to put up with all the trouble you get into in the press, the government intervention. If you get big enough, there are all sorts of things that hit you, and so lawsuits. So I encourage them to become heroes so that they know that they're standing for something, doing something extraordinary, taking long odds at an extraordinary outcome, and then when they get there, they'll be ready. That's kind of what we do, and it's a very unusual school. It combines a lot of speeches from various successful entrepreneurs, but it also is all team-based, which is very different from most schools. And you get team hero points if you do extraordinary things. Not for, like, if you do a really, really good job on a project, we just sort of pat you on the back, good job. But if you've done something extraordinary and succeeded, you get a lot of hero points. If you've done something extraordinary and failed, you get hero points. So people start to get the idea that this is a different world than the one that you've been trained in. There's an opportunity, and then they go on survival training with Navy SEALs and Special Forces and Army Rangers, and then at the very end, they pitch to a panel of venture capitalists. So it's a very interesting, unusual school.
So as an investor or the entrepreneur, we're thinking of moonshots and BHAGs and whatnot. I want to talk a little bit about your Split California initiative.
Yeah.
So what was the thinking behind that? What happened to it? What were the lessons you took away from that?
Well, California, it's interesting. I was starting to think, wait a second, California, we pay the highest taxes, and we have the worst services. We have the longest lines at the DMV. We have the worst roads. We have bad infrastructure. We have bad education. All the public school education is really near the bottom, 47th, 48th. It's in that range. So they're taking the most money and providing the worst service. And I thought, what does that remind you of? And I thought, oh, it reminds me of a monopoly. It's a monopoly position. Nobody wants to leave that beautiful weather. They're in a monopoly position. So I said, well, how do you challenge a monopoly? And I thought, with a startup. So I started by thinking, okay, let's take 4 or 5 counties and turn them into a state and challenge the big competitor. And then I thought, no, that would not be fair to California, because you'd be taking 4 or 5 really good counties and making them separate from California. And so then I split it into 6, because I thought, well, that'll be good, because it'll create kind of a nice accountable environment, where the states would all have to compete for you, citizens, businesses, whatever, money. And then I got shot down. The people who count the signatures are all union employees of the government, and they didn't want this thing to pass, and so they discounted my signatures enough so that 6 Californians didn't get on the ballot. Then we did some figuring out some focus groups, and we decided that 3 Californians, 6 was like, boom, way too much. How can we ever? 6 actually made a lot of sense, because it was 6 million people per state. It made
too much sense.
Became a natural thing for, like, the average state would be 6 million. Well, so I went for 3, and I thought, this will be good, because we'll split the coastal area. So San Diego has a state, San Francisco has a state, and LA has a state. And each one, I made them equally, demographically equal. The tax base per person was roughly the same. And so that people would still have a choice. They would be able to choose. If one state became, like, very aggressive on something like choice, like pro-choice, and another state didn't have choice, well, the women might move from the one that didn't have choice to the one that did. if one had super high taxes, the businesses would probably move to the one that had lower taxes. One had really good education, all the families would move to that one. So you would see a little bit of a dynamic, but they'd all still be able to stay in that beautiful golden state. And so we did it, and we got twice the number of signatures, so they couldn't do that to us again. And it was just about to go on the ballot, and what had happened was the polling went from 8% in favor, like nobody cared, to 12% in favor, to 17% in favor, to 26% in favor, with 35% undecided. All of a sudden, it was real and very scary for the union, and the union somehow twisted the arm of the Supreme Court of California and got them to pull it off the ballot before anybody could vote. So if you're a Californian, you didn't get to vote on it. So you get the ballot, and it says Proposition 8 and Proposition 10, and then there's no Proposition 9. It got yanked before they printed the ballots.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and that was dirty pool. But, and I think Californians really are suffering for it. I mean, it's just getting worse.
So,
more potholes, more bad education.
you mentioned a couple points that I want to segue into. So one is this concept, you use the words like, monopoly. You alluded to platforms becoming dominant, almost referring to them to as a utility. What are your thoughts now when all of a sudden, I know why, the safe harbors of the DMCA, the Googles, the Facebooks like to say we're just a platform or neutral, so to speak. But all of a sudden, they're like, okay, we may have to because of what's happening in the EU. But do you think that the government has a role, a duty, an obligation to step in and say maybe these now have become a bit too dominant and intervene? Or do you think it should be laissez-faire? Just what are your thoughts?
The government is us. I mean, at least it always used to be. Now it seems that the government is us against them. And I think there's something wrong there. I think the government has made it so they've gotten so big that where it used to be, I remember going into government offices where they'd say, what can I do for you? And now it's what you have to do for me. And that kind of attitude, I think, is wrong-headed. And the government that we all grew up and loved as we were, American freedom-loving citizens, has now gone away to a government that is kind of overused. It's like anytime I have a problem, maybe the government should do something about it. I don't think that's appropriate. I think most problems can be solved locally. And the idea that the government is going to create the thought police is terrifying to me.
When you were pursuing the split California, were you acting like as a citizen, a successful investor, or were you going to were you going to be going into politics? Is that
No, as a proponent.
Okay.
So
you don't have any aspirations to go into politics?
I am always looking for a freer, more open world, and a world that is safe for the entrepreneur, safe for the innovator, so that we get an opportunity to go to Mars or save the planet or whatever. All those things happen because of entrepreneurs. Government likes to say that they save the planet or they do. They talk about problems. That's what their role has generally been, at least the politicians. The bureaucrats' roles have really just been used to be to sort of fulfill the law. Well, now they are actually dictating the law because the politicians come in, they go out, the bureaucrats are there forever. So they'll let those laws just sit if they don't like them.
Do you feel now that this is the first time in American history where all of a sudden socialism isn't a bad word, it's not taboo? All of a sudden capitalism needs defending, so to speak.
I'm glad you asked it just that way because, capitalism has worked, 75 out of 80 times, and socialism has never worked. So why are we even thinking about socialism? And then they talk about crony capitalism. The cronyism is socialism. Every time you start putting businesses together with government and they're making the laws for the land, You've got socialism. That's crony socialism. It makes absolutely no sense, but it's the socialists, I guess, I don't know why there's still socialists on the planet. It has never worked.
I think the issue is also that, like, when you study history, like Lenin and Castro, even they ride this populist movement, this, you know, sentiment of unease, but then when they get to power, it's like absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I think that's the bigger issue. So what is your message?
You know, the way it might end up working is we might move from capitalism to decentralism. And I think that that's where the value may be. The future of humanity may be in a decentralized humanity, which means that it'll start virtually. It'll start like with various governments competing to give you your health insurance. And maybe governments sort of reaching across border and making various people citizens, or the way Estonia did, made me a virtual resident of Estonia. And then eventually, you know, Malaysia has a virtual residency program now, and there are 100,000 virtual residents of Estonia. Kazakhstan has a virtual citizenship program. It looks like people are going to have governments that are tied to land, the way they are now, and then there are going to be these virtual governments. Well, I actually think more and more of the virtual governments are going to provide better services than the ones that are tied to land. The tying of ourselves to a landmass or a tribe, I actually think we've lived that way for many, many years, and it's been very good for society, a little competition, all that stuff. Well, now I think we're going beyond it. I think, you know, starting with Bitcoin and other digital currencies, they are decentralized. They are global. So if you're from Syria and you're a wealthy person in Syria, and you get the military comes and pushes you out, and you go to Greece, you're a refugee, you have nothing, that probably won't happen to people if they have some portion of their money in Bitcoin. Because you go to Greece, you start your life again, you got your Bitcoin, you got going, you're ready to go. I think we're in a place now where all those geographic borders are becoming less relevant, but the leaders of those countries rely on those borders so much that they're going to do things like build a wall, or in China they're going to not allow cryptocurrency in the country. So, you know, China put a kibosh on Bitcoin, and so all the Bitcoin entrepreneurs had to move. They had to go to Japan, where Japan said, I'm going to make Bitcoin a national currency, which they did. And so now you see in the shops, you see in yen and in Bitcoin, you see things where people can pay. I think humanity is going to a new level, and I think you go forward 40 years, and people will be talking to their grandchildren, and the grandchildren will say, what are all those booths? And the grandparents will say, oh, that was customs. That was that thing that we had to do before we walked into another country. And so there was all this sort of friction to travel. And the grandchildren will say, that was stupid.
Lightning round, we have a minute left, unfortunately.
Okay.
So short
Lightning
answer is
round.
one word.
Okay.
What's more important, idea or execution?
Execution.
Founder or team?
Founder.
Revenue or profit?
Transformation.
IPO or exit? M&A?
Oh, neither. You build a great company, lots of options open up for you.
Best investment you've ever made?
In money or
no,
in...
but that's it. More intangible. I could find the money one somewhere.
I think Hotmail, where I came up with the idea at the bottom that
the viral.
that it would spread. That had to have been the biggest world transformer that I've ever been involved in. But then Skype, of course, does even more.
On steroids. Best founder you backed? Or most impressed, the one that you would be like, I'm really proud, I got teary-eyed that I backed this entrepreneur. Not that they're better than somebody else.
So two that really come to mind, Robin Lee at Baidu and Nicholas Enstrom at Skype.
I always invest early. I invest when I see the vision, I see the opportunity, and I see the person who I think can make it there. I mean, we invest in, a girl and a dog, or two guys and a cat. We just say, is this person going to dedicate their life and make something extraordinary happen? And yes, in that case, she was that person.
If you had to do Theranos again, would you do it?
Well, yeah, because it was a young girl who, biomedical woman dropping out of Stanford, came to me, said, I'm going to change healthcare as we know it, and we all know that healthcare needs changing. And she had this really interesting idea for how we would take very simple blood tests, and then the data would be very valuable. And she had another idea, which maybe she'll do someday, which is really major transformational. And we're seed investors, and we take risks on both sides.
It's an honest answer. I respect you for saying that. It's very easy to. Last question, does President Trump win in 2020?
Probably.
I think so too. All right. The only regret I have is I don't have more time with you, because it's a wealth of information. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it.
Paul Ryan, theoretically a brilliant man, studied at the side of Jack Kemp, but he did suggest the border adjustment tax, and he was serious. And a whole group of us had to go and say, not only over my dead and bleeding body, but I will come back from the dead and haunt you. We will not have this. And if you were to talk to Paul, who's a great guy, he still believes in it. He still thinks the arithmetic would work on that.
There's something called motivation or incentives. If you have the proper incentives, people do great things. Or even if you just have flat incentives, people do great things. It's just when you think that it's all in the numbers.
Yeah, well, the ugliest thing in Washington is the word, I think this will work, let's score it.